I think that was all Michael, to be fair.
Doesn't surprise me.
You guys ready to get started?
Who's the new guy here?
Joel.
Where's he from?
G. James, Joel, is that where you're from? G. James?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, G. James. Alex was just quizzing me. Alex Joel.
I don't know why I waved at my phone.
Yeah. Down button to go next slide.
Either down or right. I don't know.
I don't know either. I just didn't see the Windows key and I'm getting confused already, so I'm just trying to.
What is that?
You've got to forgive me.
Primarily, like a Skype Enterprise voice shop, and then it might go to Teams and all.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, down.
But I refuse to touch Skype.
Oh, does left work as well? No,
I think it's
down.
fair.
Oh, no, with both.
I do everything.
There's probably a bit of lag. There seems to be some lag happening with the thing that it's connected to. Hopefully it'll be fine.
Yeah. We're doing module of the month, and then I think it's Michael doing a talk, Jordan's doing a talk. Is that all we've got doing talks?
And Alex.
And Alex is doing a talk as
It's
well.
my fault for poor time management. I quit my job and I'm flying to the UK on Friday. For a month.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, and I when I did my last talk as well, I thought I had all the time in the world, and things just get the better of you. You know, like work just comes up or something comes up, and that's it. You have to really plan them out.
Guys online, if you're watching this, can you just please let us know if the volume's okay?
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how today's goes, because now we've talked about maybe every sort of fourth or fifth session doing a lightning round.
Yeah, cool.
That's
That's
a
good. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be good. Everyone wants to talk for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Shane, let us know. Yep.
All good. Yeah. I mean, and I take compliments on that. You know, on how good looking I am as well. So ask those as well. Oh, none. Okay. So today's going to be a little bit different. Thank you, Hudson, for everything they do for us. Thank you, InSync, for everything they do for us, and thanks to Iron Man Software for their donations as well. We're trying to get some more sponsors on board. So if anyone's employers want to sponsor, then feel free to point them in our direction.
Yeah, Jordan.
So yeah, feel free to do that, and when we're looking at doing our own, getting some more sponsors as well. We're going to try and get Meetup back. We were talking about swapping to Eventbrite. We're not getting that idea because Meetup is the go-to place. So, but they're just pricey, so that's why we're looking for sponsors.
Out of curiosity, how much is the price?
Yeah, what are they charging us? $90 every 6 months.
$90 every 6 months.
It's not too bad.
For 50 users, yeah.
Oh, for 50?
Yeah, the biggest problem with Meetup is that you generally get a lot of inactivity.
So people sign up and then...
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
like
just
200
go.
users
So I was
there.
actually I actually got to a point where I was kind of cycling, so I was like looking at activity and then just kind of bumping people off so new people could join.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that was working for a while, it just got too big, yeah.
And then we just had some randos
Yeah, like spam.
Yeah, we had a lot of
And you
spam.
dealt with the spam, with a few PowerShell questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what
I
does
was
this number
like,
do when they're going to answer
yeah, I
that?
was like, oh, so what do you plan to do to get out of PowerShell? And they're just like, Bob. And I'm like, well, you're out.
Yeah, that's it.
So
From the
it's
start.
cute, sexy singles wanting to play with PowerShell.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael's like all over that.
Sign me up.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So PowerShell news, and I'll take news from anyone else as well if you've got any. There were some good ones this month, and I may even go back in time a little bit.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So the terminal is a great one. Has anyone actually installed that yet?
I've installed it, but then
I've used it consistently for the last 2 days straight.
Okay, and
It's just a terminal.
what we want to hear from you is it is amazing.
No, it's with WSL it renders some of the characters a bit better, like the read line stuff.
Okay.
Do like Vim. Renders that.
Did you fire up any PowerShell on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does that well.
Yeah, it's fine.
And you can run Windows PowerShell as well as PowerShell core.
Yeah, and you
PowerShell.
run Perl and Ruby and all the rest of it.
Okay, awesome. Yep. And I think doesn't it support emojis?
I don't.
Pretty sure it
that's
supports
not a
emojis.
Unicode.
That's not a thing I do.
Yeah.
It would.
It's pretty much all of Unicode characters.
Yeah. So it's emoji friendly. That's the most important thing because return sad face.
You put emojis.
Turn icon.
Did you ever put emojis in file names?
Yeah.
You should be able to do that now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, you got to have emojis.
As long as you put a big poo next to a function.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know if anyone saw this on Twitter, but someone demoed PowerShell running on Android using. Now, forgive me, I'm not an Android or a Linux user, so forgive me for this. but they've used userland. I might not even be saying that right.
It's probably an app, but userland is.
Yeah, and it allows them to run Linux ARM64 on the Android phone, and then they put PowerShell core on that, and then they
There's various
showed that.
options you can do.
Yeah. So that was just a cool demo, I guess. I imagine there'll be plenty more platforms going forward where PowerShell will run fine because it's so open and cross-platform these days. So the DSC announcement came out. I don't know if anyone saw that.
No.
This was a sad day for me, but everyone else seems to be really like super excited about it. So the new DSC engine, they've said will continue as a piece of Azure functionality.
Is it a rebrand? Or?
It's a rebrand plus, like, it doesn't seem to work out of Azure. Yeah. So have you seen this?
I've seen that it's pretty much an Azure product now, not
Yeah.
something that you can use outside of Azure,
Yeah.
which is annoying.
So they've called it Azure Policy Guest Configuration. It runs the new DSC engine inside your Azure VM and allows you to configure it using DSC.
That just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's actually really good. Yeah, it's APGC. So you can ask everyone, using the APGC? Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like they put out a survey. So if you look around on Twitter, you'll see a survey about this, asking like what you want to do, and most people are saying, "Can we use it outside of Azure?"
So is that an extension then for the VM, or is it?
I think it is.
Or is it still part of Azure automation?
No, I think it's an extension, but I think it appears like just as a regular tab, not under the extensions tab. You know, like if you do DSC, yeah, I think it's built into the regular list of tabs.
We can still do it on-prem.
Yeah, you can still use DSC as it is, but the new engine is this. So I don't know what that means, what they plan to do. When they announced it, they were like, "Yay!" And I'm like, "What? What's the yay? I don't understand."
Typical Microsoft.
Yeah,
We have feature parity.
It's
It's changing now.
it's Azure, so yay. Module of the month. Over to Mitchell.
Any other news?
Oh, we're there already.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Did anyone else have any other news?
Did we have the meeting before version 7 preview was out for
Oh, I
PowerShell?
don't.
I think we
We
just
just
said it
mentioned
last
last
week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Version 7.
Alright.
Over to you, Mitch.
I installed it. Had a quick look.
Alright.
Still in change.
It's just PowerShell.
Okay. Module of the month. It's actually not a module, but
Oh, okay. That's much.
it's
Not module of the month.
it's not a module, but it's still pretty cool.
Oh, Poshbot.
Poshbot. I don't know if any of you have seen Poshbot, heard of it. Heard of it, yeah. So chat ops, all written in PowerShell. I assume some of you probably use Slack or Teams or a combination of those. So chat ops is awesome. Poshbot is essentially a chatbot that allows you to do two-way feedback. You can actually integrate PowerShell modules and send information to it, and then it will do the work for you. So I've actually got a little video to kind of give you an idea of what it actually works. But it now supports Teams. I don't know when this happened, but the last time it was Slack only, and now
I'm pretty sure last time I checked it was
yeah,
just like,
it now supports Teams. There's a bit of a runaround. You need an Azure function to make it work. But they've got a guide for it. I'm going to give that a go.
I think you also need like 5 Azure VMs.
I mean, it's like
Azure.
it's like 30 steps or something, where Slack's like 2.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of steps. I'm going to give that a go. There is a PowerShell Summit talk about it where they kind of go into more detail. But I thought I'd actually open this little. So hopefully this actually works, Jordan. If this opens something it shouldn't.
So two-way
If we see something we shouldn't.
So two.
We're about to find out.
Yeah.
It's YouTube, should be fun.
Sorry about that.
This is a really quick. It's a snippet of a video where they're demoing it.
PyCharm.
See if it actually works. It's probably pretty hard to see.
You can full screen.
If it's full screen.
It's on mute. It's on mute.
The mute is fine. What they're saying doesn't matter. Get it? Hopefully. Okay. Yep. So you can see the command create VM with some details. And it's actually creating a VM right now.
Awesome.
And it will sit there and wait and then feed back details about the VM it just created.
Awesome.
That's all happening in PowerShell. Like it's
Seems
called stuff in the
dangerous.
background.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so you can just bring modules in, write your own modules, and do cool stuff like that, like add an AD user and like. But you know, if you're writing your own module, you can actually sort of guard them so they can't do crazy stuff. This is something that I want to do.
Yeah.
So we can add a user and imagine this happening in a public channel, right? So everyone knows what's just happened, what's been typed, who did it, you know, and it's just a bit of text.
Yeah.
that did all the work. So it's just the next sort of interface, really. So
Yeah, that's great.
pretty cool. It's been around for a while, but it seems to just keep getting better. It's got sponsorship now. They've got a Patreon. There seems to be money coming into it, and it seems to be developing a lot faster. So, but yeah, two ways. So it creates these cards, so you can actually have actionable information in those two, which is super cool. That's something Slack does. I don't think Teams
does it.
It does it,
Yeah,
but it's
you
not
can create actionable items within Teams.
perfect. Oh yeah, it ends up just creating a link basically. That
Yeah,
runs
it's
that.
in essence Teams, because Teams is just a giant JSON object that you pass into it, so you can dictate what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Highly customizable.
but yeah, you can do all sorts of stuff. Whatever PowerShell can do, you can make this do. So if you're interested, I am going to dig into it. So I might do a talk on it if anyone's actually
I'm
interested
keen.
in it.
Yeah.
So I want to make it work on Teams. So
Just a question though.
Yep.
With the commands that you've seen using that pushbot,
yeah.
do they still seem like, commands that you run on a command line, or can you actually interact with them?
You can, yeah. So that's it's calling a module. So it's doing a match and calling some information in a module. So you can wrap your own module to do all sorts of stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
And so I imagine that you could use natural language potentially as well.
potentially. It's
Like
really
make me a VM called.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
that's,
yeah.
that's what I think the next
Alexa.
stage is.
Yeah. Again, that'll come down to the smarts of the module.
Yeah.
Poshbot's really a framework.
Yeah.
Wow, I see.
So
Glenn
it-
just said regex hell.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the
I'm glad you're up there because I've been lost. I don't know where this type menu is.
Sydney, the top right.
Slideshow.
oh right,
Next
okay.
to
I wasn't sure whether this was actually. I literally went to touch your screen. But it's Mac, so
Yeah.
can't do stuff like that.
Did it on my wife's MacBook all the time, jabbing the screen.
Yeah. Do the thing.
Do the thing.
Remember when they had the first touch screens that came out, and we just used to call them punch screens because they just wouldn't work.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty cool that there's the link for the summit talk. I think it seems to just be getting more and more popular now. It supports Teams, hopefully WebEx Teams. We'll see.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll go next. So it's
Scripting games. Yeah.
Oh yes.
It likes. Yeah. So just to recap. Just recap on the scripting games. Automated. I like that. Sorry, I just saw your sticker on
Yeah,
your
the
thing.
sticker's
It's really
great.
cool. With the automated, the scripting games, for this specific one, it's basically just creating a Rubik's Cube solver using PowerShell, extra points for a graphical solver. So now there is obviously it's got to be using PowerShell. You can't just offload it to JavaScript and things like that. Like the call has to be PowerShell. Submission to the Slack scripting game Slack channel, and we're going to randomly select it at the next meetup. So it's hopefully, if you guys want to do that, that'd be good. It's also obviously a really good exercise. So it's, I'm actually quite keen to see it because it will. The way that I'm kind of thinking about how I would do it would be 3-dimensional arrays, and then basically maintaining, using with the way it twists. Anyway, I'm kind of nutting it out in my head. But anyway, scripting games, really cool. So if you guys are interested or if you need any further information, just come and hit me up. Also,
And do we arrange a prize or anything?
yeah, there is a prize. I got a whole bunch of free EK water cooling gear from my PC build. So I just said to EK, give me free stuff, and they sent me free stuff. So
Awesome.
that was pretty cool.
Done.
So let's go next. Okay, PowerShell Ignite talks. Am I up first?
I believe so.
All right, first. Awesome. I'm going to be using whiteboard. There's a whiteboard here.
When do we start bringing the? How long have you got before we start playing the music?
Let's give us 20 minutes. I think that's plenty of time. I do think I'm going to have technical difficulties because
Feedback.
it's just I've kind of got to log into GitHub and do things. So first things first, OAuth 2.0 rundown. Who knows about OAuth 2.0 or OAuth 1? Yep, it's one of those things you kind of know about it, but you don't really know about it. You just know enough to get by. It's usually the thing. I'm going to give you a quick rundown on how it works, why it's in place, a little bit more of a deep dive. We're not going to go too deep because obviously I've only got 20 minutes. So what is OAuth? It's obviously an RFC, 6749. I have linked the RFCs to the ISC pages, so you can actually, on the slide deck, so you can actually go and just read the document. I basically did that if I wanted to learn it. It's the easiest way to understand anything like to do with internet. Basically OAuth 2.0 is an authentication framework, obviously RFC, and allows basically, it allows limited access to a HTTP service. So in essence, it's an authentication. 2.0 obviously supersedes 1.0. OAuth 1.0 basically exchanged the whole concept of rather than using your personal username and password to an actual access token. That token didn't have many features, so OAuth 2.0 kind of built on those and added extra features. So the best way to describe these kinds of features is, you know how you guys probably want to link an account and you see does blah blah blah, you want to allow so and so and so and so, and you have to click that allow. That's actually the key feature with it, and what that means is that key component is it's actually a user interaction. So you as a user have to physically authenticate or verify the identity of that request before it actually will go ahead and do it. So it's one of those processes that basically from an app perspective, it's perfect because you as a user will know exactly what your app wants to have access to. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that does that in terms of scopes, but we're just going to kind of blast through this and see how we go. So usernames and passwords are exchanged by tokens. So tokens are basically pretty much rule in this sense. So generally speaking, in OAuth 2.0, you're going to have two types of tokens. You're going to have an access token and you're going to have a refresh token. Tell me to slow down if I'm going a bit too quick as well. And access lists are defined using scopes. So scopes are basically what define what that app can access. So similarly to a file server where you delegate access, read access and write access to that directory, it's a similar process. It's just only done on the app itself. So for example, if you think about, as any of you guys use Microsoft Graph?
Yeah, so we define the scope saying access to user data.
Yes, if I want read access to me, or I want to read access to Active Directory information, basically you can explicitly delegate that. It just means that from a security perspective, you're actually able to enforce a much tighter security rather than just having free reign over your entire infrastructure. So if your key does get compromised, at least you're kind of restricting it to a point.
And is the scope?
Yeah.
Is that set pre-authentication?
That's set pre-authentication. So we're going to talk about that in GitHub when I do my Git example. I'm going to set the scope to be read because when I'm demoing, my client secrets are going to be out there, and then I'm going to have to revoke them. So people will probably be like quickly taking photos and trying to stooge me up. But yeah, you can actually delegate what the person has access to. Now, one of the really cool things here is, for example, with the tokens, is they expire. This is one of the really important things. So your access token that you're going to get issued will expire after a period of time. Some applications will nominate how long that time period can be. Other applications will be set. So you might have an application that's only set to 15 minutes, where you have other applications where you can nominate a 24-hour token expiry. Obviously, to refresh that, you can use your refresh token and exchange it for a new access token. But depending again on how the API is configured, you might be able to refresh that token indefinitely, where others you might not only be able to refresh that 3 times, 5 times, 10 times.
And you have to refresh it before it expires?
Correct. So if it expires, yes and no. The refresh token has its own expiry time, but most of the time though, usually from an API perspective, like when I'm writing code, I'll actually refresh the token 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
And that just gives me plenty of time for all my other applications to kind of sort themselves out, so that by the time everyone's on the new token, there's no issues.
So it's two distinct tokens.
Yes, 2 distinct tokens.
Yes.
Yep. Now, I'm kind of flying along here because I'm kind of trying to make sure you guys are all on the same page. The OAuth 2.0 process. I've broken this down into 5 steps. We're going to try and demo this. I'm going to use the word try because
So this essentially happens like now when you log into the Microsoft portal, it says log into GitHub. You click GitHub, it goes to GitHub. GitHub then requests the authorization code.
exactly right. So this is basically how this whole process works. I'm going to try and flow through this as quickly as possible, but basically I've broken it down into 5 easy steps for everyone to understand. First step, set up access. So setting up your access is physically yourself going and creating the application, or that is when you're creating and deploying your application, whether that's production code, you might have a piece of production code that's widely available out there, like log in with GitHub.
Yeah.
That would be an application that's basically deployed on GitHub for that.
Yeah. Or log in with Facebook. Or
Yeah, correct. So, or you can have yourself a private one. We're going to be working with private ones because I don't want to create a public application. Oh, that's mine. I'm like, is that mine? And then I was like, no, what's that there? Anyway, so basically, you're creating an application. That's going to give you some important information. The first thing you're going to do there is you're basically going to set your you're going to set what your application is. You're going to describe how it is. You're going to set your scope. You're going to define your scope. You're going to define your callback URL, and the callback URL is really important as well. For PowerShell, for myself, I'll use a callback URL 127.0.0.1. Everyone's kind of like, well, it won't exist. There's a reason why. But basically, for an application, the way that it works is that post or that callback URL is basically, in essence, a HTTP GET with that actual query, which in essence was basically querying your application with the confirmation, the authorization code. The second thing. So when you're actually using your application, you need to get the authorization code. The authorization code basically validates your client ID. So when you go to, for example, let's use the example of GitHub. Basically, you're going to go to GitHub and you're going to go to a specific URL and you're going to say, this is my client ID. GitHub's going to ask you to physically log into the web form. You're going to log into the web form, and then what it's going to do is it's going to post back to that, it's going to do a web call back to that HTTP callback URL with your authorization code as a query attached to the URL. Most commonly it's used as a code, so the query key is code equals, and then the values are after it, generally what your authorization code is. Using your authorization code, you can then basically exchange it for an access token. Now this varies from API to API. Some APIs might want specific things, like some want actual explicit scope to be defined in there. Others even want the callback URL, but predominantly it's your client ID, your client secret, and your authorization code. Have those 3, you get your access token. With your access token, you're going to get information about that access token. You're going to get your refresh token, you're going to get your access token, you're going to get your token lifetime, so when it's going to expire, and then from that you're going to get some other various information. Obviously using that, then you can actually start using your API. Once your token's getting close to expiring, you can then hit it with a refresh token. So that's basically the 5 steps. I hope I'm not going too quickly, but I'm just trying to make sure I get through all this content. It's demo time. All right. Let's pray.
It's not PowerShell, but
That
in the
one next to it is the VM to the right.
It's hung. There we go. This one?
Yep.
Perfect.
I say it's not PowerShell, but in the Python Azure AD graph samples, there's a very good demo of this as well for the flows.
Okay. This is hanging. Yes, it's hanging.
Is there an engineer? Cool. It's a Mac.
Do you need a genius?
Yeah, geez.
There you go.
Like, yeah, it's like.
Yeah, it's still, I don't know. It was working before it connected to the monitor.
Yeah, I think it's because it's outputting and then it's getting all wonky. That's all right. All right, so I'm probably not going to be able to give. How many minutes do I have?
10.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to do the initial demo, so I'm just going to go straight to demo 2. Demo 1 was basically us just manually going through that process. Demo 2, I'm just going to basically show you some C# classes. I can't actually go ahead and I don't think I'm going to have enough time to actually open up GitHub and set it all up because I just didn't have. We're kind of running a bit late today, but that's okay. So we're just going to go through the demo process and I'll actually explain the whole thing to you. When it wants to play. Actually, you have it open VS Code.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Sorry guys, sorry. I think the CPU must be absolutely maxed out.
It shouldn't be. I've connected to a larger monitor at home and it's perfectly fine.
PowerPoint? Must be the PowerPoint, because the PowerPoint is
It was
large.
happening before I opened up the
Okay.
link.
Have you got Microsoft Teams running?
No.
Any other electronics?
Well, there's Slack's on there. It's running 2 VMs, but that's like I usually run a bit more than that.
If does anyone have any questions, like, so feel free to ask questions. That's if you I want to ask questions online as well.
Demo.
Yeah, I'll find the Python demo of it, because that goes through that. The callback URLs and everything as well.
It's literally like I click and then it just goes out.
Yeah, offer you. Yeah.
Users so short though.
I wonder what's trying to do an update in the background. Could be hiding from all that.
Okay, I think we got it. All right, so so
To save your time.
I've wrote.
Same logins.
So what I've done is I've taken some of my production code and I've literally stripped out all the trash. And basically I want to kind of take you guys through that process in terms of what I did to get to where I am. So the first thing is we've obviously, we're going to take a step back and kind of from a programmatic point, and we're going to then dive back in. So everyone's here familiar with PowerShell 5 classes?
No, what other? Can you explain the whole thing to us, Bob?
I'll work down to the bytecode, please.
Okay, all right, sweet. Can you guys see that? That's. Oh, I might see if I can blow that up a bit. How do we zoom? Oh, get rid of. This is really slow. I think demos are not going to happen today. Just FYI.
Any tech support you can provide, John?
I'm just trying to think what it could be. I've closed as much as I can, really. It's
Close Slack.
It's something to do with the HDMI connection.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
because I was using it on the train here.
Yeah.
Before I connected it up, it was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Do you want to check the equivalent of Task Manager, whatever that is? I don't even know what that is. Will that help you?
That's right. All right, so we'll just see how we go. So I basically have my class here, and as you can see, I've got a whole bunch of properties set up within this class. So the first thing is we have our authentication URI, our auth code endpoint, and our token endpoint. So as you can see, it really. Sorry, I'm just. Just doing this so I can. Alright. So
Just close the cycle.
yeah, but if it takes like ages to move the mouse.
I think it's Command B. No, it'll be Control B in the VM. Maybe not.
It is. Oh, there we go. Yep. Perfect. So, we have our solid authentication URI, and it's just basically a string format onto the end of that. So there's my URL endpoints. So then we have our OAuth configuration. So a whole bunch of these properties are not going to work because literally some of this is mainly untested because I didn't really have full amount of time to finish this. But the key thing is that basically what I'm doing is I'm capturing client read access token, refresh token. There's some other bits and pieces in here, so you can see I've got authentication response, callback URL, things like that. They're actually essential for the actual the HTTP class. So I've got my little class down here called Internet Explorer Form. this is basically a class that I actually hijacked off a gentleman and rewrote. He actually had it as a PowerShell script and I just rewrote it as a nice class. And what it does is it basically does that visual logging part. So what you do is when you go to actually access the client ID and the secret, and also you access the URL endpoint with your client ID, it'll basically say, all right, you need to log in. That URL form is basically what I'm browsing to. So I'm going to go to that URL with that specific, with that client ID endpoint, and it's going to bring up that nice form. When I obviously hit login, it's going to then go through the whole redirect. And the way the Internet Explorer form works, we'll get to it if we can have a bit of time. Basically, it's going to capture that response, that authorization code response, and then going to store that back in here. Obviously, I have all my three keys. Now I can basically exchange all that for an access token. So it's a fairly simple process. I'm actually going to make this publicly available so you guys can have a squiz at it. So basically, you've got my default constructor. That's just my clone, which is just old code, code from there. And here's my initial constructor. So I've got my client ID, secrets, callback URL, and scope. So I'm defining the scope, callback URL, all the bits and pieces I need for that object to be able to do what it needs to do. So I'll set all those properties. Down here you can see all the authorization code. So that's, remember, like I said, that's the very first step. So to get the authorization code, I'm just defining some URI parameters. We're going to, I believe we're going to splat, I think. I literally kind of haven't really fully read this. So then basically I'm going to build that URI out. So URI builder is just a custom class. All it's doing is it's just basically adding those queries to the end of the URL. So all it's doing here is it's adding, so it's actually adding that splat hash table in there. So what it's doing is it's adding the client ID and the scope to the end of the URL. That's all it is. It's just URI builder. Following that, we're going to take the URI that spits it out, put it into the Internet Explorer form, which is just the default. That's not the default constructor, but the overloaded constructor. It's going to specify the URI and this bad boy, the regex string. The regex string is going to capture my code. This is actually, like I said, this is really important because each API endpoint will have different regex patterns. So you kind of just, I can't remember what I was saying, it was trying to write a universal one's actually really hard because everyone has their own kind of, has their own formats. Then you have Internet Explorer form, and obviously it's just going to kick off this method, which is basically show dialog. That's basically going to bring up a nice window, WinForms login. It's going to capture a response, and that will actually wait until the response. So it's not asynchronous; it's just synchronous. Following that, obviously you got your null. It's now checking it again. So if nothing's returned from that specific variable, obviously nothing was returned. And if there is, then we have our return URI. So it actually has its authentication response being published. Now we have our auth code. Following that, so if we go back up, the next thing is it's going to exchange it for an access token. So we're just going to get an access token. So down here you can see, this is just FYI. I actually wanted to keep this keep this here so you guys know what it varies from API to API. So this is one from desire to learn. So it's a completely different way of doing it, but you've got basically grant type, redirect URI, a whole bunch of other things that it wants in there where other APIs don't. They're quite happy. So you can see in here, I've just basically got a parameter block that I'm building out that I'm just going to splat into invoke REST method. And so the URI is our authentication token endpoint. Client ID is the body. So you've got client ID, client secret, and you've got the auth response. So that's the authorization code. Encode it with a form URL encoded content type. Make sure it stops because I'm actually catching, and then basically method post. So it'll actually invoke that. So it's just calling invoke token request. It's just invoke REST method, which basically then catches. So you can see down here, then it'll then update that specific object. So when it updates the object, all it does is this is my favorite piece of code for the entire thing. All it does is the way that GitHub works when it captures the response back is it's literally a static query string. So there's basically separated between obviously your ampersands. So I just wrote a quick piece of PowerShell that will basically split it all up and then basically build that into an object that we can use. So I just call it decoded web request, and then from that it'll set the values. And then because I'm really bad and I haven't actually done any tests, I'm just going to set authenticated to be true. I'm assuming that everything's fine, but it might not be. And then that's pretty much that. So I'm not going to go, how many minutes do I have left?
No.
Okay. All right, so I'm just going to quickly, for you guys, just to make sure that you guys are completely across the whole thing before I go any further, I'm just going to quickly draw down on the whiteboard. So everyone's across it and we're all good. So, step one, we're going to set it up. So what did we do here when we did the setup? What are we doing?
You're creating the access rule?
Exactly, we're creating the access rules, we're setting up the application in the website itself, we're just setting up the scopes. That's step one. Step two is, what are we doing here?
You're getting your access token.
Close.
Authorization code.
Authorization code. Step three. We're exchanging for an access token. And step four, we're using it.
Is it step 2 or 3 where you're actually putting in where the user's actually putting in their username and password?
Step two,
Yeah.
auth code. So if we kind of just take it to a quick visual representation. Sorry if I'm kind of drowning on a bit because I kind of want to make sure that we're really all across it. Is basically you have, so obviously we're setting up application. This is your callback.
So what would be this app? What would be an example of this app? You're setting up an app, what would be an example of it?
It could be anything, like for example, let's say you've got an enterprise app for Microsoft in Azure. You've got
Local web app on your
GitHub account. Anything that basically supports it. Microsoft Graph, Google. Google's a little different though because they basically you don't require
certificates.
They use a bit more. Yeah, they use certificates, but it's pretty much any REST-based endpoint. Generally is going to use this product. Now, if you go back to my REST talk, I was talking about REST as the Wild West. And what I mean by that is there are some REST APIs out there that are tragic. And I mean, I actually came across one which was, I'm not going to mention which one it was, but like you're doing sets. Yeah. Its first name is L. Simpson. Wait, no, too obvious. Simpson. Anyway, so it basically is any REST API endpoint that you want to hit. Now, so obviously we're going to set an API callback. This is your URL, your postback URL, all that kind of stuff. The scopes, and then from that, you're going to get your client ID and your client secret. Now these are all little mini passwords.
I think the thing that I'm missing here
Yep.
is, and this is probably, everyone else probably knows this,
Yep.
but I guess I'll say it anyway. So you have data in this app at the top
Yep.
that you want to allow something to access on your behalf.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
using your credentials.
Correct.
Yeah, 'cause
Yes.
you don't want to give that other app your username and password.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
So
because that's misinformation that comes in.
OAuth is basically a mechanism that allows you to do away with that and basically use tokens instead.
So in this app that you're setting up at the top, you might have details about you.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. A good example would be GitHub.
Yep.
You want to delegate, for example, your PowerShell script to go hit GitHub.
Yep.
That's a really good
Or
example.
VS Code. something
Yeah,
like
VS Code,
Yeah.
things like that.
You can also do it with hybrid modern authentication with
Yep.
Exchange and Exchange Hybrid.
Yep.
Might do it
Okay.
that way.
Okay, so we're going to get our OAuth. We're going to get our OAuth. We're going to get our auth code. again, it varies, but most of the time you're going to use your client ID to go get your auth code. Now it's going to be a HTTP endpoint they're going to get, and it's a GET. So you're going to be going HTTP blah / blah, CID equals.
So you'll go to the app that you want to grant access to. Oh, sorry, the app that you want to give access to.
Yes, so this would be, yeah, exactly. Yes, it will redirect you. And it's going to redirect you to a nice little login form, username, password.
Yep.
From that, once it's successful, the application will then hand you, it'll redirect the page and it'll hand you in the URL itself.
And that'll be the callback URL, right?
Yep, that's the callback URL. Good
Yep.
call. Yep. That's going to be your code.
And that's usually in the URL.
Yep, that's
Yep.
always in the URL.
Okay.
Always in the URL.
Okay.
So once you've got your code, you've got your three. You've got your good three. You get your big three. Now some of them, again, it varies from like application to application, but I'm kind of just sticking with the standard. I'm going to quickly rub this top part out. So once you have all that information, basically now you can exchange it for an access token. So what you'll do there is you're going to do a post.
So there's the application that you want to give access to will send you to another site then?
It can send you to another site, yeah, but all you need is that
This
authorization code.
Yep.
Yep.
So it'll do this post for you?
No, you're going to do this post.
Okay.
You've gotten the code from the GET,
Yep.
but what you need to now do is exchange that client ID, sorry, the client ID, the client secret, and the authorization code for a token.
Okay.
So basically, you're going to go to a URL endpoint, and it's going to be something like /token. Usually, that's like along the lines of something like that. With that information, then basically you've got the big three, or you're gonna. It generally varies, but from the standard, it's generally the big three: client ID, secret, and auth code. You can then exchange and say, in the body. That's what I was saying. When you got that body, that really varies and it can be quite complicated. That body basically contains, let's just say, client ID, client secret, and auth. Because basically the auth code, all it's doing is it's essentially just a user authentic, like it's a user confirmation, so they know that user's actually pressed allow.
Where did the client secret come from?
Client secret's always when you create the application.
Okay, and
Yep.
the authorization code came from that first request?
Yeah, from that, yeah.
And does the authorization code expire?
Yes, it will expire. So usually you do this in one big hit.
Sorry, I'm hijacking
Yeah,
a little bit. But
that's right.
Yeah.
So once you have the information, so we're just going to say that's all bundled up, it will then return you an access token.
With a lifetime.
Yep.
Okay, so
Now within that information, you're going to have, like you said, it's going to give you lifetime. It's going to give you, some might give you refresh tokens, some might give you other information, but that's basically essentially the process.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, so the app, the second app that you're granting access to, so say you're granting access to your GitHub.
Yep.
And the app that you're using, let's say it's VS Code, or even though it could be anything.
Yep.
It'll likely store that authorization code and then can reuse it over and over.
No.
To refresh the
Authorization code is unique. So when you've used that authorization code once, it pertains to explicitly that login session at that time. So if you try and use it from another time, it just won't work.
Okay.
So you can't replay attack in essence.
yeah, it's not about like authenticating you permanently to that app.
Yeah.
It's like I want to hit a REST endpoint to get some information.
Yep.
Let's say I want to list all my VS Code projects.
Yep.
Yep.
So I need to authenticate, go all through that process, get the access token,
Yep.
and then I can append that access token to my request.
Yep.
Could be a get or a post or whatever.
Yep.
And get a list of projects.
Yep.
Right, and then that'll expire very quickly.
And that token
Yep.
will
It's
expire.
a really short life.
It's a short lifetime.
Right.
I'll quickly jump back.
So you wouldn't use this to grant access to like an app on your phone to access your data permanently?
No.
It's a different process.
Yeah,
Okay.
no. Okay. Some. Yeah. Again, it depends. It varies from API to API.
You can use OAuth to get some information that allows you to have a long-term session,
Yeah.
but that's different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
All right. I'm just going to quickly.
You can click on the actual Firefox button itself.
Okay.
Do the announcement?
Okay. I'm just going to use the browser thing here because.
Yeah, you're probably better off just doing that.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly, I'm going to blaze through this because I'm sorry, I'm kind of running really late. So, scope FAQs. So I want to quickly talk about scopes. So, it's basically, like we talked about, it's a mechanism that limits access to a user account. It's denoted by an action and a location. So action is read, action's write, reset, those kinds of things. Location, what are you trying to access? Active Directory, mailbox, Exchange calendar, things like that. That's basically, it pertains to that. So you basically say, for example, for GitHub, it's read profile. That allows me to read the profile. Scopes must be specified in exchange for a token. That's somewhat yes and no. Some will allow it, some won't, but essentially you should. Access tokens, I talked about it, they have a limited lifetime. You can adjust the lifetime of the token. They are mostly signed using JSON web tokens. Is it JSON?
I think so.
Yeah.
JSON web tokens or any other cryptographic protocol. It's cryptographic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're basically still are passwords and they should be treated as such. Now, they do have lifetime, so the benefit is you kind of, if you do get compromised, they're going to lose access after a period of time. But essentially, So, I'm going to quickly talk about JSON web tokens. I've briefly talked about this before. Hopefully, we can recover it. So basically, realistically, it's just a representative claims. So basically, what you're doing is you have a plain text and an encrypted component. It's very, very similar to script signing. So if you guys are familiar with script signing your PowerShell scripts, it's pretty much the exact same process. Obviously, everyone can still read your code, but the detractor is the fact that obviously if plain text is not equal to encrypted, then you know someone's been tampering with your code. It's the exact same process with a JSON web token. So if someone decides to go mess with your web token and try and say, hey, I want to try and insert Wayne Hoggett into my web token rather than use Michael Zanatta, obviously he needs to modify the encrypted component. Those two do not match. The token is invalidated. That's basically how your web token works. Questions? Questions online?
Oh, I had a question.
Yep.
When you're setting up your app, you have to specify the callback URI at that
Yep.
point? Okay.
And obviously the application owner or developer or admin sets up the scopes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's the reason why, when you, like I said, when you go to so-and-so, GitHub wants to access your details, and it says, it wants to do this, do this, do this, do this. That's it actually detailing the scopes of what you're trying to access. So it's really important that you read that information because that's what it's going to literally have full access to. If you don't want it, then you can tell it to, biff off.
So obviously temporarily.
Yeah, and it's
While
a
the session exists.
while the session exists.
And the app can have, so you in the when you set up the scope, you can set up the scope to do, let's say, add and delete a user. But when you go to request a thing, you can actually request less access. So if you specify the scope, you can say, I only need read access now. And so when they prompt the user, it will show them that I'm only asking right now for read access.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole point, is to be able to show them.
Yep. And it's really good. I want to quickly. I'm not going to be able to demo this because we just don't have time. But basically, there's a website called jwt.io. Highly recommend you guys check it out. So, if you're going to be looking at when you look at your access token, it's a JWT string, and basically it comprises of two strings. You've obviously got your signed component and your unsigned component. They're split by a dot. So you're going to see a whole bunch of base 64 characters, dot, a whole bunch of base 64 characters. And you can actually chuck that into jwt.io and you can have a look at your code. So I was going to jump in there because it actually has a really good demo.
CyberChef as well.
Yeah, CyberChef as well.
CyberChef.
But yeah, so that's pretty much me. Any questions or whatever, it's all good. Sorry that I rambled on, but I think I might have...
If you ever set up an Azure AD instant application, the UI for that, where you go and set it up, is really, really explanatory of setting up your scopes, what you want to do, you call that your lays out quite nicely.
So these are the links to the IETF. This is what I use to understand how it works. Really good documentation on OAuth and JWT. And there's a nice little link to jwt.io, which basically kind of is a really cool link for, just allows you to have a look at your Java JSON Web Tokens. But anyway, that's it for me. Sorry I rambled on a bit too much. Whoops, I shouldn't have done that. Now
Yeah, you're stuck.
I'm stuck. I think the next person is Jordan. So let's welcome Jordan.
So it's not PyCharm that's causing it like that.
Yeah, PyCharm's closed, don't worry.
You're not re-indexed.
So the battery would be down to 0 if that was open.
Just super quickly though, why is the mouse working like perfectly all of a sudden?
That's what I thought. Like, it's just like,
No, it's stuck now, so it's...
oh, I was going to say, because I was
Let me
going to say
close.
claiming user error, but you saved
as
it.
much as I can.
Quit Docker desktop.
So while I'm doing this one here, I'll be... I can't kill that one. That's fun. Basically, I'm talking about the various different ways that you can actually execute commands in PowerShell. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can actually do that. All have their advantages and disadvantages. So I'm just going to try and go through all the ones that I know of. There's probably other ones, but just to give you a brief explanation. First one is using the call operator or just the actual executable itself. It's the simplest version that you can actually do. You can capture the standard out, but the standard error is a lot more difficult because it actually sends it to the standard error of the calling process. And it's pretty much as simple as just doing whoami.exe or ping.exe or something like that. If you've got the executable in a variable, if you're using spaces, you need to use the call operator, which is just the ampersand, and basically you just do that and then you executable. Adding arguments, same thing, you just add the arguments on the end as you keep on going from there. So that's probably the easiest way of actually calling an executable, and if you're just doing something that you want to run, that's probably the easiest way of doing it.
And the call operator's been around for a long time, hasn't it? Like, it goes back a long
With version 1 because they're dinosaurs in history.
Yep.
The next one is start process, which is an actual PowerShell commandlet. This one here, it gives you a lot of low-level options, so you can do things like actually call an executable with a verb. You can control the way that the actual window is opened up, set environment variables. You can run it asynchronously in the background, so you can actually start the process, continue doing your work, and then sort of wait for the actual process to finish, but you can also get it to sort of just lock it and wait for it actually to finish. This is probably the one that I would recommend if you're doing a bit more in-depth stuff. The main disadvantage that I found with start process is actually cumbersome to actually capture the output. So getting the return code is easy, but if you standard out and standard error, the only way that you can really do it is to redirect it to a file, which personally I hate. I hate touching things on the disk, but that's what you have to do with start process. Luckily, start process actually uses a .NET class, the system diagnostics process, underneath. Basically, you can do everything that you can do with start process, but you can also capture it to a variable. So if you don't want to touch files, you can do that with this class here. The downside with this is that it's a lot more verbose. So like with any .NET class that you're calling, there's a lot of classes and objects that you're creating, but it is possible, and if you've got like a shared commandlet that you have, you just put it up in there and then you call it the way that you want. And I'll show you an example of that as well. So that's sort of the main ones that I would recommend that you actually look at if you're using it. This one here is probably a bit low level, and I would only use it if you really do need that functionality. I'll now talk about the ones that you probably shouldn't really need to use and probably don't really need to look at as well.
cmd.exe's PowerShell.
That's one thing that I highly recommend. Don't call cmd.exe to call another executable. You're escaping things and you're doing all sorts of fun stuff there.
So there's no cmd/c, you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much. Only do that if you're wanting to call a cmd command, like dir or something like that.
Is start an alias for start process?
No.
Say start today, but I can't remember it.
It's like SRP or some random alias.
In fact, on PowerShell is a different user. It's just like a program.
Yeah. So the next one here is shell execute. I've actually never used this before. The main reason why it's a COM object. I hate COM, but you can use it. It's quite simple, and you can do verb actions as well if you really do want to, but once again, it's COM, don't use it.
And so verb actions, you mean like like the right click menu, like edit and that sort of things that you're talking
Yeah,
about?
so like there's a whole bunch of verbs that you can define with file extensions like print, edit, open, run, run as. It's very much a shell-ism, so Windows Explorer shell, so not really the underlying Win32. But you can do that with the start process, system diagnostics process, and shell execute, but anything further from there. The next one is WMI, so the Win32 process, the create method on that one there. This one here gives you a lot of fine control over it, so you can do things like set the title of the console that's being created, you can adjust the actual dimensions, as well as a whole bunch of process creation flags. And the main reasons is that it's pretty much sort of the next layer that sits on top of the actual create process Win32 API. The main downside is that because it's actually created by the WMI engine, it's a lot harder to actually capture the output for this one here. You have to pretty much call something like CMD and redirect it to an actual file. So there's very few reasons why you actually want to use Win32 process create. There's actually one really good reason that I'll show you that you may want to use it. So the last one, or ones that you actually have that you can use is, when this one here actually goes across, is the create process functions. So you have to use pinvoke to actually do this. The easiest way is just have C# code embedded inside your scripts. But basically this is calling the fundamental Win32 APIs that actually create processes, and there's 4 main ones that you can actually use. There's create process, there's create process with logon, which you're able to specify credentials to actually run as a particular user. There's create process as user, where you can actually specify a specific access token. So say if you want to run a process as the system account or trusted installer or something like that, create process as user is what you want to use. And the last one is create process as token, which is pretty much create process as user, but it's delegating all the work through some separate service and over RPC, so you don't have to have as many privileges as user actually requires. You can pretty much do whatever you want with this one here. So if you need to do something weird, something unusual, you're probably going to have to do this. The massive downside is it's incredibly complex, and you can really shoot yourself in the foot if you don't actually do your pinvoking correctly. Basically, because you're using unmanaged memory in C#, if you're trying to access something you don't have permissions to, it's going to crash your entire process. So it's very finicky. Once you get it right, it probably is good, but as you'll see in the demos, it's quite long and verbose. The other thing I was going to talk about is escaping rules, but I'll probably show you the first demos before I go on to the actual escaping rules. So this is all up on my GitHub, and I've put a link on the actual slides that you can actually go to see all these demos that I'll actually show you.
I'll upload the slide deck at the end.
Now it's my turn to be frustrated by this laptop. Okay.
It connects to the screen. Whenever it connects to my surface to the screen, the connection's terrible.
It's weird because when I did my demo like a few weeks ago, it was perfectly fine.
Solid, yeah. Every time I try it, I lose like half the screen every 2 seconds.
Oh yeah.
It's probably surface.
Okay, so the call operator. So as I was saying, it's very simple. You can either just specify the executable directly. You can actually save the output to a variable. So anything that goes to the standard out goes to your output variable. You can also call it with the actual call operator. It depends if you want. You can have it with or without a space. They're both valid. It's entirely up to you the way that you want to actually do it. And when you're specifying arguments, you can either do it just literally as a string. You can actually specify it as a variable inside an array as your actual arguments. Please ignore this whole bunch of things here. So this is just to sort of test out how that you don't need to actually escape the spaces inside the actual path. So I'm just copying an executable to something in there. It will do that for you, which is quite handy and it's quite good. And if you want to access the last exit code, so the actual return code from that one there's a global, I don't know if it's global or a magic variable within PowerShell, which is last exit code, which contains the last exit code of the last process that you've actually executed. So if I was to run this twice with exit 1, exit 2, this one here will be 1 and then 2 whenever you're actually calling it. As I was saying, if you're wanting to actually capture the output to the standard error output, so if your application's doing that, you can't do it. It will appear on the console, but unless you're doing something tricky like actually redirecting your current process's standard out to another stream and then reverting it, it's quite hard to actually do. So it's not something that's actually simple. The next example is start process.
You can do it.
You can do it on laptop. So in this case here, it's very simple. You basically just do start process. The file path is the executable that you want to call. It will find it in the path. You can do the full absolute path if you do want to. There's a whole bunch of different things you can actually control. So by default, it will actually start it in a brand new console that's separate from the one that's currently executing. But if you want to run it in the same one, you can do no new window. And basically, well, I won't demo it now, but the output isn't captured. So if you want to capture the standard out and standard error, you can't do this, mainly because in this case here, out will be null. If you want to actually capture the output, you need to do something like this here, where you're creating temporary files, you're redirecting it using this redirect standard error, there's a redirect standard out to the actual path of the file, and then you're reading the contents of that file before you're finally deleting it. So it's possible, but you're touching files on the disk. It's not something that's
very dirty.
Yeah, it's not something that's quite nice.
That's how LabTech's doing that. When you want to run some remote PowerShell, that's what they're doing. That's so dirty.
And if you want to get the exit code, it actually is quite simple. So in this case here, I'm specifying the pass through and the wait. So what that means is it will run this process here. In this case, it's calling PowerShell with exit 1. It will wait until it's finally finished and then returning the actual information, which in this case here is a process object. And then there's an exit code property on there that you can actually access. So as I was saying with that verb one, so there's a special verb called run as. So if you're checking, or if you want to start a script that needs to run as administrator, so in this case here, this is just a standard one, you can use this part here to automatically prompt UAC saying, you want to run it as admin, I say yes, and it's going to start a brand new process that's running as administrator. So in this case here, I've got a new window, administrator. So that's a way, and you can actually check if you've got the admin privileges before doing that. Seen a few people do that to make sure that your script runs as admin. So that's a nifty thing.
Is run as, not run as administrator?
Run as.
Yeah,
So just
okay.
RUNAS.
And run as a different user, I suppose, is another one?
Pardon?
If you want to run as a different user without elevating?
There's a credential object that you can actually specify to it. There are limitations, so sort of fundamental to Windows, but I think I had an example there.
You can do credentials. That's what I had to do today to run a PowerShell session as another user.
Yeah, so basically you can specify credentials and then,
Yeah.
Okay. So that's start process. Come on. Have you been timing this one here?
Oh, yes, I have. You're 10 minutes in.
Cool.
Was there a time? I was just going to waffle.
So system diagnostics process. So in this case here, I'm giving you an example of how to actually capture the standard out and standard error without actually touching files to disk. So in this case here, you're creating this process start info object. You specify and use shell execute false, so it's not actually using shell to start your process, it's using Win32 for it. I say, yes, I want to redirect my standard error, standard out. In this case here, I'm running PowerShell and I'm running SD out, SDD to the output. And I'm creating a string builder object for both the standard out and standard error. From there, I create my process object, I'm setting my start info for this information here. And then finally, what I'm doing is I'm creating a delegate or a script block, which is being registered as an object event. And what this does here is that it's saying, okay, once this event is being fired, it checks if the data is an empty string of null. If it isn't, I want to append a line to my string builder. That's what this part here. So the process object has it's a bit sort of, has two events that you can actually register to. So you can register to output data received and error data received. So that's the standard out, standard error. So I'm registering this to that event. It's saying run that particular action that I've got up to the top there. And then the message data, I'm passing in my string builder for the various objects, so that actual action can actually append to my string builder. From there, I want to actually begin reading the output and error, because I actually need to start doing that, or else it'll just build up and lock. And then finally, I'm just waiting for it to actually finish. From there, I'm registering that event, and then I just need to do toString on my string builder objects to actually get my standard out and standard error. So I'm not touching the file to a disk, it's all happening in the background through pipes, and that's how you can actually use system diagnostics process to capture your standard out. But as you can see here, we've got 33 lines to get all that information compared to some of the other stuff that you've got there. So if you want something quick and dirty, it's not really that, but if you've got your own commandlet, that's definitely an option that you have there.
Jordan, you went a little bit level 300 there just for a
Sorry.
second.
Yep.
The register object event and unregister event, those are built in PowerShell?
Yes. Yeah, so those built-in ones, you can register to any .NET event that you do want to, and when that event fires, it calls your action, so in this case here, my script block, and then my script block has the information of what to do with that particular action.
Yep.
Yes.
So in this case here, I'm appending, so my event message data So my message data is this message data object which I've added to my string builder. I'm appending a line, so that's an actual method on a string builder object.
Yep.
And then I'm appending the actual data that event is pulling in. So that is dependent on the event that you're actually registering.
And so that output data received and error data received are events on the diagnostic process?
Yes.
.NET object? Okay.
Yeah. If you go to the .NET pages, it's near the bottom. There's I think 2 other events that you can actually look at. They're just the 2 that I'm interested in.
And they're not events on the executable that you're running. They're events on
the .NET object itself.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's completely separate to the executable that I'm doing. Whenever that executable sends something to standard out or standard error,
that event will trigger.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So I told you that I don't like COM, and I sort of had to get a bit down and dirty. In this case here, I'm just creating the shell application COM object, and I'm calling shell execute. So in this case here, it takes in the executable that you're calling, the arguments is your second one, working directory, the verb, and then the window styles. So there's a whole bunch of enum values that you can set there to specify it. In this case here, I was just trying to show off what happens when you specify something that's not just your standard open verb. So in this case here, I've got an ini file. I'm specifying print, and what that does, ini is registered with print, open up the print dialog box. That's what this will do if you actually run it. And then finally, I'm releasing my COM object, so I'm not dirtying the system. But that's quite simple, but you can't really capture the output. And there's a whole bunch of things that I wouldn't recommend, but it is possible if you do want to do it. Win32, where are you? Process create, right at the bottom.
Would PSExec be one? I suppose that's more of a utility, isn't it?
Well, PSExec is its own executable, so you need to use one of these methods to actually call PSExec. So Win32 process, basically what you need to do, you need to create a process startup object. So in this case here, I'm setting my title for that startup object. There's a whole bunch of different properties that you can actually set with it, but that's just referring to the console title. In this case here, I'm calling PowerShell. You can specify your current directory if you do want to, but then I'm also referring back to my process startup information. From there, I'm calling invoke sim method, which is a function built in with PowerShell. I'm specifying the class name, which is Win32 process. I'm specifying the method I'm calling, which is create. And then finally, I'm specifying the arguments, which is this here. So that's just key value pairs that's specific towards that actual method that you're calling. From there, when that actually is run, I'm validating the return value. So WMI have got return values to verify if this actually failed or not. So if it actually did fail, it's not going to error out that you would normally expect. You need to verify that the return value is not 0. And if it is, there's a whole bunch of different reasons that actually relate to. And then basically at the end, I'm just outputting the process ID of that process that started. So this is all happening asynchronously in the background. If you want to wait for it, you need to call something like wait process if you want to do that. That's sort of outside the realm of this one here. So just to give you an example of what that one does, hopefully this is actually going to run properly. Yep.
So can you tell, I think you can tell it to wait in the process args, can't you?
Not for this one.
Oh, that one.
So for start process you can, but for Win32 process, it's everything in the background.
Yep.
What's actually happening is it's calling the WMI engine in the background. It's passing that information through whatever the hell WMI uses, and then that actually starts your process for you. That's not going to do it for me for some reason, because this laptop's being fun. But basically that was meant to show you that the actual title of the console that started is, oh no, there we are. So in this case here, it's set to my title, which I had there. So that's one of the cool things. But then one of the awesome things, or the main reason why I actually use, one of the reasons why I use this is if you want to escape a job boundary. So job's another concept in Windows where you can group a whole bunch of processes together. So the main examples for my case is that when you create a process through WinRM, it's set inside a job. If you exit that main process, it's going to kill that job as well as all the processes underneath it. Yeah. So the reasons why I would need to use it is if I want to escape that job. So I'm wanting to run a process that stays running in the background even when my parent process is actually being killed. So it runs even though WinRM's stopped. So in this case here, we can see that the WMI provider service has a PowerShell object to the process ID of 732. If this one here is going to cooperate. .732. So you can see that's not actually a child of my VS Code process, it's a child of my WMI process. So that's the only reason why I've actually found that it's actually useful, but it does have its uses sometimes. Okay, so then the last example is using pinvoke. So I've only got an example for create process because I ran out of time doing the other ones, but it's quite complex. So in this case here, let's close my terminal. So there we go. Cool. So in this case here, I'm using add type, which is another built-in command with Microsoft. With PowerShell type definition, then I've got a whole bunch of...
That's simple, eh?
That's simple. I've got a whole bunch of C# code with a whole bunch of functions that I'm calling, and it keeps on going, keeps on going, keeps on going. Some enums that I'm defining. Keeps it going, keeps it going, keeps it going, keeps it going.
Save it as a snippet.
And start calculating.
You beat me to it there. I was going to use Notepad. And I'll just Notepad.
Basically, so that gets to about 500 lines of code just for the actual definition inside it. To call it is also another story. So in this case here, I've got an example of calling a process. Let me put a breakpoint here.
This is the sort of script I would encounter where someone like is just studying Python and you know, like 600 lines of code, Python launches.
Hey, it's in the Windows Store now.
This is just a sort of script where someone thinks they're really smart. You know, like you're writing all the code they can just to do one simple thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Note thinks.
This is a mistake.
I think you did the end anyway, but that's your 20.
Okay, so I've started this process, and what I'm actually doing is that I'm specifying this special process thread attribute, parent process, and I'm specifying it to, that's actually going to be a bad pip because that's from before. But what this does is you can actually do the same thing with WMI, where you can actually create a process as a child of another process. So if you're wanting to do low-level stuff like that, that's when you need to actually pull out the big guns and use pinvoke. But it's got a whole bunch of things you can actually control it, but there's very few reasons why you want to do it. And once again, it is Windows only, so this won't actually work with PS Core and
I love
Linux.
how the method is called dangerous get handled.
When you're dealing with unmanaged code, a lot of things can be dangerous. Like I say, if you do the wrong thing, you can crash your entire process. So that's just basically it telling you, make sure you know what you're doing before you actually call this.
Can you like start PowerShell as a child process of Notepad?
Yeah, if you want to. In this case here,
Troll.
in this case here, I was trying to start it as a child of, come on, as a Proc Explorer,
Yep.
but it wasn't actually the valid PID because that's when I was doing my example for it. So that's the main demos that you have there. You can even go a step further if you really want to, but I've never needed to go that far and I probably won't ever do it.
Assembler.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about is briefly around escaping arguments. So in this case here, it is close to black magic depending on what you're actually calling. I thought I had it down pat, but it turns out when I was testing this and doing this demo, I was wrong with a few things. So I'll be talking about just the basic fundamentals on the actual Windows layer, not sort of through PowerShell. But when you're calling a process and it's not through CMD, because that's got its own weird rules in itself, basically a double quote is the only special character that you really have to deal with. Sometimes when you do backslash, a lot of people think that's an escape child, but in this case here, backslash is only an escape character if it's actually preceding a double quote. The Win32 rules does not equal command prompt rules. Command prompt has got a whole bunch of meta characters, so it uses the caret, ampersand, quotes does its own weird thing. The percentages is like environment expansion, stuff like that. That doesn't matter at all for Win32. So this is another reason why I don't do cmd.exe/c, because then you have to deal with that on top of this.
Yeah.
But basically, you don't mind if I...
You can go. That's why I put the whiteboard there.
Cool. So in this case here, if you've got a double quote, what that means is that it tells the interpreter to ignore any white space characters as argument delimiters. So if you've got a space, new line, tab, it will actually put that as part of the argument that it's currently going through. So ignore space. And this is going to keep on running until you actually put another double quote on there, or it reaches the end of the actual argument the argument list that you've got there. So if you've got an argument like a path with the space, that's why you need to use double quotes to actually ignore that. If you've got backslash double quote, what that means is it's actually double quote literal. If you've got backslash double quote, what that means is it uses a backslash and then ignore space. And then this one here can keep on going. You can do 3.
That means you're inside the matrix.
Which means basically use a backslash and then use a double quote. So when you get to this level here, sorry, that's pretty horrible because they're very close to each other. So when you get to this one here, basically what it is you have the account that you've got there. So I've got 3 backslashes. You divide it by 2 and then you round down. So in this case here, I have 1. And then if you have 1 left over remaining, that applies to your double quotes there. So in this case here, it's actually, I want a double quote literal. The main reasons why this sort of matters,
modules, yeah.
I found is if you're wanting to pass through JSON to a process, because it uses double quotes and it uses backslash double quotes to escape double quotes inside it, this can be quite difficult. And I've actually got a PESA test that will be a part of this that you can actually try it if you do want to. Come on. With a whole bunch, like the only way that I could actually get these tests to working is to use that create process. So you've got that thing on the top there. But in this case here, if you want to escape this argument, so if I run this.
And in what methods do you need to worry about this escaping? Is it the WMI method, the diagnostics method?
I believe it's start process that you'll need to worry about this. I found that the call operator does some of this, but I haven't tested it to the extent of how far it goes into, but it will actually escape spaces for you, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. But I'm pretty sure start process you will have to do it. But in this case here, if I want to actually escape an argument to get this literal value here, I need to just go through the actual value. So I've got a brace. I want a double quote, so I need to do backslash double quote, KEY, another backslash double quote. Oh no, I've got a space, so I need to actually go.
This reminds me of something really familiar. Your SSM, like.
Oh, you love that.
That was the worst.
We already made that anyway.
So because I have a space here, I need to actually enclose the argument. I could potentially put the double quote here, but I'm just going to put it at the start just to show it. So what this means is that it's encountered. If it finds any spaces, it's going to ignore it until it reaches that next space there. So in this case here, once again, I want a double quote, value, space, but now I want a backslash and a double quote. So if you remember from my weird ass thing happening there, I need to do 2 backslashes and then a backslash double quote. Quoted once again. And then I need a double quote literal.
I remember dealing with this. I broke so many things.
And then end space. So hopefully I've done this one here correctly, so my test will pass. No, I've done something wrong. Whatever, you can try this out. I've added some links to the actual PowerPoint. This GitHub repo which has these tests, and like that's the last one that I had on there, and it's probably the most complex of all the ones. But there's a whole bunch of actually enclosing quotes, spaces, dealing with special characters, which in this case here you don't actually have to do anything. You just use them literally, and then just simple arguments. So
I've just got one really good suggestion. You should totally add that specific test to PS Crohn's.
Yeah, I've been needing to. The only trouble is I need to figure out how these rules actually work with the call operator and stuff like that. Because I thought I knew it, but when I was actually doing these tests, I found that it does escape some things, not everything else. So
I was just sitting there because I think like there would be so many angry people, and they're like, "Who would be this guy?" And you're like, "It was me."
So yeah, you can try that if you want to. It just requires a binary, which I put a link in there, and there's a whole bunch of details. There's also a README that sort of goes around some of the stuff that I've actually talked about, and everything. So and that's pretty much mine. Hopefully I didn't fry your brains too much, but
the last part was excellent.
That was so good.
I'm surprised no one walked out.
Same here.
You're like, I'm not supposed to walk out myself.
Cool. And then yeah, useful links. So that's where the demos are, and then there's a whole blog post. There's another one as well around how Microsoft has gone around this. Side note: it's not pretty, but it's what it is right now.
Like, just a quick question. Like, I know it's a bit of a roundabout way to do it, but could you take a shortcut and just encode it as base 64?
If you're calling PowerShell, yes, that's the simplest way because you don't have to worry about it. But say if you're calling something else that isn't PowerShell, no. Because unless that actual executable supports it. So one of the use cases that I found was, I think Kubernetes takes an actual JSON XPath type value, which has single quotes, double quotes, braces, backslashes, all the fun stuff, spaces. Trying to actually get that to call through PowerShell was really quite fun. So that's where you sort of have to understand some of these rules. But I thought I knew it, but after doing this demo here, I found that there were definitely some gaps that I didn't know about. So last thing I forgot to mention was I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically --%. What that does when you do the call operator, it tells PowerShell to stop interpreting anything beyond that line. So if you have like dollars and stuff like that, and you don't want to actually interpret it as a variable, it tells PowerShell to stop doing that. But it doesn't negate the need to do some of that escaping that I was talking about there, but it's a way of just embedding special PowerShell characters in that line that you maybe have in your arguments.
Does anyone know what the --% is actually called? I don't know what that operator is actually called. I don't know what its name is. I know
it's like the stop operator or something like that.
Stop PowerShell engine operator.
Yeah. And I think it was added with version 3, but
yeah.
But that's up there.
Good. Thanks, Jim.
Nice.
I've got everyone run over because mine's going to be really short. So, as said before, I quit my job and I'm actually going to the UK for 3.5 weeks on Friday, so my timings were very off, so I couldn't do the Plaster Talk, so very sorry about that. And the screen's locked. Yes. So, is there any Bitlocker users out there?
Yes.
Hopefully you're all using Bitlocker. Any Intune users out there?
Oh, can I pause for a sec? Someone said, Shane O'Neill said it's called the stop passing operator.
Oh, there you go. Stop passing operator.
Yeah.
Does anyone have to use
Stop
BitTune
passing
with?
symbol.
BitTune? Bitlocker with Intune?
BitTune.
BitTune, yeah. That's what it should be called. So there are, within Intune, so most of my day-to-day work is Intune, a lot of Intune work. There is device policies in there for Windows 10 to activate and configure Intune and deploy it. However, a lot of the work I do is with hybrid zero-day joined Win 10 devices, and let's just say your mileage would vary with actually getting BitLocker to enable and encrypt the drives. It's very hit and miss. If you're on the very latest Win 10, then probably it works a lot better. If you do straight as zero AD join, it tends to work quite well. However, I know Microsoft's very sort of keen on this sort of just a zero AD join and that's it. Well, sorry, but we've all got hybrid zero AD. Everyone's got domain controllers. A lot of stuff still joined on-prem. So within Intune as well, in the last year, we've got the Intune extension that gets deployed onto Win 10 devices, so you can actually run PowerShell scripts. So you write the PowerShell script, you upload it to Intune, and basically it just transfers the file down to the laptop, Win 10 PC, and then just runs the PowerShell script. So what did I think to fix it? But PowerShell. So onto the screen, I've started Spotify.
Yay.
Go Power Rangers.
Cat Empire, eh?
It's good.
Nice.
Jordan's never going to put his laptop on.
Never again. This one, wasn't it?
Yep.
So I'm lucky in the fact of all the Intune work I do with Win 10 obviously is PowerShell 5.1, so I don't have to worry about anything else. So that's delightful. It's very lucky. Right, where are we going?
It should be already open. You just need to minimize the PSVG demos.
There we are. I've actually scrolled up. There we go. Can we do it?
Don't double click on it. Next minute.
It's right, I'm just open IC. Well, Notepad.
Well, it's a VM, it won't do anything, there's no TPM.
Okay. My machine at home is actually a bit lucky.
So the struggles I ran into mainly, apart from the policy not applying via Intune, was what do you do about Windows 10 machines that are already encrypted? So the project I was working on at the time, they wanted to use AES 256 keys for the encryption. So Bitlocker defaults to 128. So what you do about machines that are already at 128, you need to unencrypt those, clear out any keys, re-encrypt, upload the keys again. That can't be done via just PowerShell policy. It just doesn't apply. It's PowerShell, not PowerShell, Intune policy is mainly just like a device configuration. It just pushes it onto the device, that's it. It's not going to unencrypt anything, re-encrypt it. Come on. On my Surface, this would work.
So Alex, for those of us who aren't super familiar with Bitlocker, the keys you're talking about are the recovery keys? Is that
Right, recovery keys, yeah.
And they're stored where?
So the script I'm using backs it up to Azure AD. So there's a command line in Windows Manager Framework 5.1, backup to AA, backup dash Bitlocker key to AAD.
Okay.
You can also back up to your on-prem AD as well.
Yep.
There's various tools for that.
If you go back to VS Code, it should be already open there.
Is it?
Just save you.
Painfully trying to click things.
I just need to see the
Minimize.
top tree, the PSVG demos. You just need to close that up.
Yeah. I'm getting there. I've clicked it.
Eventually.
There's Bitlocker.
Click that one.
Chin steps.
Now I'm actually a bit of a PowerShell noob. I know I'm one of the organisers here, but part of it was we had two experienced people and I could come at it from a more newbie angle. So feel free to critique the script and tell me if parts of it are arse. Not very good. Come on. Now this is on GitHub as well. So if you're doing a Bitlocker deployment via Intune, feel free to go steal it.
Yeah.
Do what you want.
Thank you.
There we go.
Oh, provided with our warranty, that's
Oh yeah.
Oh, 3 you want.
Get that BSD license in there. Go and take what you want, but don't come back to me.
Get the ACCC on that.
So it's the usual blurb at the beginning here. So encrypts our driver specified encryption method. If you want to encrypt it, it's going to unencrypt it. Clear out any TPM recovery password protectors. Re-encrypt and then back it up to Azure AD. Another thing I'm doing is I'm writing the logs to event viewer, because one of my pet peeves is I absolutely hate people that just put logs into a text file in the same directory as the script. If you're going to write logs, write them to another log thing like Elastic or whatever, or put them in event viewer. Because the first thing I do is open event viewer and look for logs when things fail. There's nothing there. Come on.
Probably better off using the arrow keys.
It must be a very specific you thing, how like opening an event viewer and try and troubleshoot errors. I don't see too many techs doing that.
It's a crazy engineering thing that I'm trying. But if you've got a problem, you open up the event viewer and have a look.
And this event viewer, does it come with Windows? Or?
It's an optional add-on, not many people know about it. It's
Still Windows feature.
Yeah, so here we're just doing the usual requires. I didn't actually know you could do requires for modules. So that was the thing. So we're just checking for TPM module and Bitlocker module, which is there. Requiring one as administrator. That's actually done as part of the PowerShell config policy in Intune. You can run as either the primary user of the device or as system. Yeah, I think you can do that. And you can run in 32-bit shell, 64-bit as well. You can actually change that around in Intune.
Is that shell ID one anything special? I've never seen it before.
Oh, that was just a template snippet.
Okay.
Go down here, regions, just set up the regions. Commandlets, OS, just take straight system drivers default. The encryption strength, string, and then validate has to be one of these options. So the issue I had with this one is they'd actually taken their security baseline from GCHQ's Cybersecurity Windows 10.18.03 baseline from the UK. So they want to use XDS 256 to encrypt it. That's actually now been dropped from the Microsoft Secure baseline for 1903, I think it is, Windows 10 1903. So now they actually recommend just straight 128 default. And that's because they basically consider it to be unencryptable, really, in real-world scenarios for normal day-to-day, because there is actually a slight overhead on 256 when you do encrypt, so it's the default now.
Exponentially strong, like it's not just double, it's like a lot.
Yeah. So real world, basically, a lot of these intelligence agencies like GCHQ in the UK say use 256, basically on the thread of it can be encrypted with quantum computing. That's the only reason why they really do it. When in real world scenarios, 128 is fine. If you lose your laptop on the train, it's not.
You're not going to have a quantum computer.
Yeah, exactly. It's still going to be fine.
It's going to be down at the local cache converters.
yeah, exactly. So what we're doing here is just creating that new event log.
That text file, don't you?
Yes, text file.
That's a command that creates a text file.
It's an EVTX.
Puts it in a Windows directory. No one's going to look at it.
That runs every time, runs an error. It only needs to be done once, and then the application is there essentially. So that's fine. And one thing I like to do is, I once long ago when I was first getting into computer, read a book about functional programming, and ever since then I just go crazy. And if there's something that I'm doing more than once, I write a function to do it. So here we have the function region with all the functions. This one basically just writes the log entry, so just taking the param a help message for user, and then we're saying so there information at error. So we're basically just information at error. That's all we're really writing to the event logs here. So the source is always Intune Bitlocker encryption script, application, and then defaults to information unless there's an error. And I'm just saying 501 or 500. So nothing, and then
I think the guy wrote that.
Really
terrible. Such a trash function.
I wouldn't get through code review, but other than that, it's fine.
Another thing I like to do is I like to just check things and just return true or false when I do the checks, and not. So I just tend to write functions to return true or false. Is what I'd like to do. So here we're just getting the TPM status. So TPM get TPM. TPM is what TPM. And that equals true, return true, else return false.
You should see the pester test that Mitch would write for that. That'd be great.
Yeah, this is no test. This was very quick.
Would you log that into a separate file?
Yeah.
There's other things I would do here. This was very quick
Bitlocker.
exactly on the day to
Right
get
next to the
the project completed because it was more of a case of it done. So here we're just testing the recovery password protector is the one and basically returning true or false if there's not. I'm also writing event log entrance. Nothing. I presume everyone can read this and understand it quite fine in this room. If there's any questions, so let me know.
And we can get, you said we can get the code.
Yeah, it's on GitHub. It's all there. And again, here, another testing perimeter protectors. Basically, I'm just testing for a lot of things, and if it's there, if it's not adding it, removing it. Set recovery password protector. We're just going there. Then set TPM protector. It's quite easy to do that. So this is stuff I initially had in the actual logic of the application that I just then, on the second iteration, just put out with the functions. And then we're just backing up there. There's that backup to Azure AD-BitLocker key protector. Lovely little nice commandlet name there.
Is that an actual valid commandlet?
It's a valid commandlet. I think they've gamed the system because that's not a valid verb.
No, it's not.
But in all the PS script analyzer tests, it comes back as fine. So
I think potentially because backup is a valid verb,
It
so
doesn't
it
read
just
anymore,
checks
does it?
if the
possibly.
It's
starts
Microsoft's,
with that or something.
it's Microsoft's rules, so their reason is because shut up.
Yeah. And I mean, we're using the same sort of iteration here as well. We're doing try, catch, throws. All very simple sort of flows of functions. Invoke encryptions here. We're just checking the TPMs.
And so, Alex, how would you deploy this through Intune?
Yeah, so you'd use this through PowerShell configuration policy in Intune.
Okay.
So you create the PowerShell configuration policy, you upload your script, and then say, do you want to run it as user, system, 64-bit, 32-bit. You don't really get anything back, and it only runs once. If you want to run it again, you actually have to change the script, re-upload it,
Right.
and it detects the change and pushes it back down.
Shane was actually asking, is it an alias?
What?
The
Backup, yeah, it could be, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great alias. No, like DIR or LS, yeah, it's a great alias.
Here we go. So we're just testing there, yeah. So TPM status, is it ready to be encrypted? Because you can't. The way I'm doing it here is we're always using the TPM to store the encryption key, to decrypt it on startup, and then we're also backing up to Azure AD. But I'm always just testing basically the TPM just to start with before we even try and encrypt it. And if it's not there, then throw and exit the script. And then we're just enabling BitLocker there. Mount.os drive, skip hard test, use space only because we want it to happen fast. You can do full space if you want, but generally in most use cases you just go use space only.
When you do use space only, does it just encrypt as it takes more?
Yeah. So as it expands out and you use more, it just pushes basically BitLocker encryption further out for the rest of the drive. And then specify your encryption. And then also adding on a recovery password protector at the end there. And then just write an event, okay, tree, BitLocker enabled on X with your try. So we're using, you got that string format? I kind of think of them as F strings like from Python. But
Yeah, that's string format.
string format.
Yeah, say that.
Whee! All the fun stuff, all the functions, and then invoke unencryption there. We're basically just unencrypting it. So that's basically what, if it's XTS AES 128 and we're trying to get 256, unencrypt that, wait to the logs again and come back. So this is all kind of boring stuff, remove TPM protectors, and then we finish the functions. So the fun stuff, so now we get down to actually running it. So if it's not commented enough, let me know. I comment what I think is enough. I'm not into commenting every other line because they usually end up writing more comments than you do. There's a happy medium, I think. Sometimes there's a bit you can see more green than space in the rest of it in some places, Michael.
It's in my code, it's like paragraphs. This is exactly what it's doing.
So we're basically checking there. So you get the BitLocker volume here, Mount OS drive, which the default is the system env drive. and we're checking the volume status. Does it equal full encrypted? And then is the encryption method what we want to encrypt as? Basically, so the first very basic test is it that. And then just go on that.
Shane just made a quick comment, just saying that's how the SQL server module got around with having improperly named commands. They used aliases.
So it doesn't appear to be an alias.
Yeah, it doesn't.
No, because there's already a backup to backup BitLocker. That's for the local to local AD.
Yeah.
So they've obviously created another one for Azure AD.
Normally they prefix these things. Yeah, in the noun, like what are they doing?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Nothing crazy, just a simple if construct. If that meets that, yes, BitLocker is already enabled on this drive, encryption methods, ring to event view, everything's happy with that problem. Else, if it's fully encrypted and does not equal the encryption strength, BitLocker is enabled, and then we're going to invoke an encryption, which is the function above. And then we just do simple do construct, start sleep, we're going to sleep for 30 seconds until the volume status ends up as fully decrypted. That's basically just simple, just wait. That's nothing too hard. And there's various ways you do this within the context of the project because it needs to get it done within a short time period. It's just the simplest possible way. And it's already running in the background, the user's not getting fussed by it, there's no toast notification popping up, it's just chugging along in the background.
I'll update that function so it writes toast notifications.
And what happens here if they just reboot?
While
it's sleeping.
Bad things.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah.
No, I think you can actually, I think it'll stop you from rebooting BitLocker while it's decrypting. Okay. And then once decrypted,
That's the only way our users will do it. That's the only reason I mentioned it. As soon as this puts up, they just reboot.
Yeah.
I thought your users just hit it with a hammer and like, okay, solve
Yeah.
now.
And then it's a bit of ticket.
Yeah.
And then we'll request checking for recovery password protectors. So even if your drive is unencrypted and BitLocker is not enabled, there can still be a recovery password protector stored on the drive in the BitLocker settings if it's already been pre-enabled. So we'll just clear that out so we don't get duplicate password protectors on there, which can happen. And I've seen Azure AD, I've done it in my own testing where there's like 16 BitLocker recovery keys in Azure AD. And as far as I know, there's no way to remove them. They just keep adding more and more. There may be a beta room, I've not found it yet, but yeah, it can happen. So if we find them, we're just moving them, throwing out the object if there's anything caught there, and again, the same with TPO protectors. And then we'll put a message there, TPO protectors found, post encryption removed to prevent duplicate issues, and then invoke encryption, that's like 5 seconds, just to make sure everything starts churning along, gets going. Because the user's totally oblivious to this, because they're running the system level via Intune, it's much like SCCM, it's just in the background. The users just carrying on doing whatever they're doing. There's nothing too great. There's nothing popping up at them. And then we hit the next else if. So this is if the drive is fully decrypted to start with. It's not enabled at all. And if there's no test recovery protector and there's no TPO protector, let's go and invoke encryption and then catch any issues.
And this one will only write the recovery key to Azure AD?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's quite easy to add in.
Yeah.
The next iteration I was going to do was basically back it up to on-prem AD as well if you want.
And does it do that as using credentials that Intune's launched it with? Like how does it have Active Directory?
It'll pick up the primary user.
Okay.
So the way Intune does it is the primary domain user that was enrolled into Intune with.
Right. Okay. So that's how it's authenticated to publish something.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Because Dave's logged into it.
Yep.
That's how it does it. It also pulls it in via the device ID as well, because the devices have Azure AD joined and joined to Azure AD. And then, again, simple sort of set password protector, and then test TPO protector. If it's not there, set TPO protector. The reason why I'm testing before adding is because as part of the invoke encryption process, it sets a TPO protector. The reason why I've done that is just to cover belt and braces. On some systems, it's happy to start a BitLocker encryption I found without a TPO protector, you can add it later on. Other times, like the services, require you to set TPO protectors to even enable BitLocker to start with. So I'd rather double and triple check, just make sure everything's on there. And then TPO recovery password protector, and then finally backup recovery password to Azure AD. And it's just a simple backup recovery password protector without the function from before. And the script complete and that goes down. So I mean it comes down to 440 lines. but it's actually just a very simple script. I just tried to function out as much as I could. And so far it's worked in 99% of cases. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. Like to event viewer, so if something's not working, I can always get on the PC, check event viewer, write a lot of things and stuff like that.
So why does the event viewer log gets full?
These screwed. Can't cover every use case.
I mean, wouldn't have to do a text file.
Yeah.
Beyond the Azure AD stuff, could you just run this as admin on the machine?
Yes. Yeah. So you can just pull this down onto the PC and run it.
Yeah, because it's super useful if you wanted to just re-encrypt your machine with better encryption.
Yeah, so that's how I was testing it. It's running on my Surface on and off. That's why my Azure AD profile was covered in Bitlocker.
That explains that outage, that Azure AD outage.
60 recovery keys on my thing. Yeah, so the default, where is it? Yeah, so the default, I'll just take it down, it's XTS128, which it defaults to anyway. And then just picks up the system drive straight away. So what you could do is just, my next plan on the next iteration is very simply just add in another parameter, Boolean, of backup to on-prem AD, true false, and then just run that function which will backup to on-prem AD. It's there.
And Alex, just a super quick question. So is there no way, this is because I'm not Intune noob, is there no way to do a test before you run this script, like you can with SCCM where you say, run this PowerShell script to test if this has been done, and then do it if it hasn't been done?
No.
No, okay.
No, it's very much a fire and forget.
Yeah, okay.
It's a lot of Intune, especially PowerShell on Intune, with the Intune management extension, is still in its infancy. They're obviously trying to push it further. I can see 2 years down the line it's going to be SCCM in the cloud. Intune is going to be what it is. It's very much not there yet. It is a very much work in progress. It's not PowerShell, but I mean I could do a session at some point on Intune quite a lot. But it is getting there. But my recommendation would be if you're doing anything with Intune, make sure you're on the latest possible Windows 10 build with all of the most available updates ever. And you'll have the best possible experience.
Okay.
If you're on anything below 1709, it's going to suck hard.
That's actually something I found the other day, was that anything like this, anything below 1709, RTX doesn't work. So I was like trying to install NVIDIA drivers, and it's like, why is this not working? Oh wait, I need to update Windows.
No. I mean, a lot of stuff I do, 1803 and above, it's much better. So they did a lot more stuff there. But yeah, so if you're straight joining Azure AD machines, like you've got a laptop or a Surface, straight Azure AD join out box, away you go, autopilot, much better experience. The BitLocker config tends to apply and actually encrypt properly. And they've literally 2 months ago added in new options of the user enabling the BitLocker encryption. So it's coming along. It's not quite there yet, but I have found this super helpful because a lot of the work I do is always hybrid Azure AD joined devices, desktops, laptops already deployed in-house. Get them hybrid Azure AD joined and then get them BitLockered up. The other option, obviously, that you can do is the BitLocker GPOs, and then your on-prem AD stuff, and to view the BitLocker keys, which is actually pretty good. But yeah, that's.
Although sometimes takes it forever to apply.
Welcome to the world of Intune as well.
Yeah.
Everything will take forever to apply, and even if it has applied the next day, it may not apply for no particular reason when nothing has changed whatsoever.
Oh, good, because it would never be SCCM in the cloud if they didn't have that.
And
never better up than SCCM.
Literally, I've got all green lights on the dashboard, everything's applied. Come in the next morning, that policy hasn't applied on that PC for no apparent reason. Nothing has changed. Do a sync and a reboot, comes good again. I'm like, nothing has changed. The polling times are quite long for Intune, 8 hours. I think it's some of the polling times to get device coverage, which is just way too bloody long. But yeah, it is coming along. I see a lot of people using PowerShell on Intune now for Chocolatey. You can use Chocolatey to do install apps rather than using
PS Gallery. Instead of using PS Gallery.
No, for mainly it's deploying Win32 apps.
Oh, they're actually just deploying the apps themselves. Yeah, that would make sense.
Because you deploy apps now as Win32.intune win or .intune Mac. Frankly, it's a wrapper around, is it? With a bunch of metadata and an XML, like Intune pulls in. But a lot of people I've found have been using just a one-off PowerShell script to deploy Chocolatey on-prem, and then using Chocolatey on-prem to pull the apps onto the devices with private NuGet feeds and stuff, rather than trying to deploy through Intune. So it's a good thing of something. If you can't do it specifically in an Intune device configuration policy, it's a nice quick fix, just to whip up a quick script and get it down there. Just bear in mind you've got your user profile, your system profile, and you can run it as 32-bit or 64-bit. Yeah, but that's about it. It's in GitHub and it's on the Reddit Intune. Intune subreddit.
Anyway, yeah.
But yeah, that's
Thanks, Alex.
not very interesting, but hopefully it takes some pain away from some people.
Have you got a GitHub link for that in the thing?
If not, I'll put it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll chuck it. You'll chuck it.
Just my GitHub slash.
I think that's it for us. It actually went a little longer. That's mainly my fault because
Yes.
yeah, I rambled on a bit too much about it all.
Yeah, Alex and Jordan was pretty much spot on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like, yeah.
So yeah, apologize. Sorry guys, I screwed up.
We really need the the
Playing music.
yeah
Yeah, I actually
Yeah.
want to get my
the Oscars
phone.
music.
I can
Yeah.
see getting my phone.
It wasn't your fault. It was the laptop's fault. It was slowing you down.
But anyway, yeah, thanks guys for joining us. Thanks guys online as well. Appreciate your time. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to hit me up or hit Wayne up. Are you on?
Join the Slack channel?
Yeah, join the Slack channel. Are you on the PowerShell community Discord channel?
No, not yet.
Okay. So I did throw the link up in Slack. So that basically, it's a PowerShell gallery. It's a PowerShell community Discord or Slack. They're basically combined. So I
It's
just
also
use,
on IRC.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're old school, you can use IRC.
yeah. I use Discord because I'm switching between Ring of Asylum and that. So when I'm dead. So yeah, I definitely recommend you guys jumping on that. There's a lot of really good content on there, and you can actually ask a lot of scripting questions. And also it means that the guys online as well can obviously reach out. If you are online, you can just hit me up, and then I can pass the messages on as well. So that's obviously an option for you guys. Yeah. Anyway, thanks guys for joining, and thanks guys online, and hope to see you guys next time. Anyway.
I'll back myself.
Let's see if this laptop's working fine when it's disconnected.
Unplug the HDMI.